Guys, I'm so happy to be here tonight. My name is Chris. I'm a grateful follower of Jesus. I am in recovery for pornography addiction as well as codependency and anger. Hey, y'all. I wanted to start out. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he has redeemed from the hand of the adversary. Psalms 107:2. Let the redeemed tell their story. I came to seek recovery here at Celebrate Recovery for pornography addiction, as well as uncontrollable anger and codependency. As you will discover, these are not the only character flaws that I have, but these are the big three here at CR. I have learned that I need to keep the main thing the main thing. I let the Lord handle the rest. I was born in 1985 to a lady who had just lost her husband in tragic fashion. My father, Bill, was killed after one of his employees allegedly came back after hours to get revenge for a racially charged dispute that he and my father had earlier in the day. He was arrested but never charged. My family never received justice or closure, but that is really my mom's story. No doubt that many facets of life were influenced by this event, but I don't really have a grasp as to what they are. My mom remarried by the time I was 3 to the man who would carry the weight of raising a son that wasn't originally his. I would like to say up front that I admire and respect his commitment to doing the best that he could. This is the man that I call Dad. He stepped up into the gap and left. He stepped in the gap left by Bill's passing, which is commendable. He and his family accepted me as their own. I owe them a huge debt of gratitude. Everything was looking up. We had a new home in the suburb of Atlanta, 2 cars, new toys, and eventually I had siblings. It was the American dream in action. I remember being a happy kid until about 2nd grade. Like many families, we had a secret. The horizon was darkening, and so was my outlook. My dad and I share the same propensity for uncontrollable anger outbursts. I learned from him that my feelings about things were not important. After all, I was a kid. What did I have to complain about? He was the one carrying the burden of raising a family. All I had to do was listen and obey and stay out of the way. Of course, unless he needed something extra, like a helping hand in the garage. So he was a mechanic, and sometimes he needed me to hold a light, which I couldn't do right, or sit in the driver's seat to help him bleed brakes. I learned by negative interaction how to not mess any of those things up. This was the beginning of my codependency. He provided for me, my mom, and my siblings. He always did what it took. As a result, he was never there. That hurts. It will always affect a child when their dad isn't there, and it did me. Funny story to illustrate the point. One of the few times that my dad was available for me, I asked him to throw me a pop fly so that I could practice catching them. So he went to the backyard, and if I do say so myself, I was doing pretty good. I had a new glove, the ones that have the weave in it, that's you can't see through it. So I was still getting kind of used to that. So my dad threw the ball. So I did what I think we would all do with a new glove that you can't see through. I lost the ball, moved the glove, and it hit me right square in the head, right in the noggin. The result was a nasty bruise, a lump, and my first ever concussion. I always thought it was curious that this is one of my favorite memories. Tragic. I didn't have a lot to choose from, so it's indicative of how my life was. Didn't really have many opportunities to be around my dad, but when I was, it almost always hurt. Pretty soon, I grew to resent him. In fact, I grew to hate him. I wanted him to be gone permanently. His behavior toward me deteriorated, and every time he wasn't perfect, I ratted him out. We fought all the time, and a couple of times it grew physical. The last time, when I was a teenager, it became violent. My mom came home in time to keep him from choking me out after I'd hit him and knocked him to the ground. I wonder to this day if he would have stopped had she not come home when she did. Not only did my family have a secret, I had one of my own. As far back in my memory that I can remember, I have always been girl crazy. I was fascinated by all the ways that girls were different than boys, particularly their bodies. It was innocent at first, but it became a problem and never left the back of my mind. I was obsessed with girls. Then came that fateful day. I was snooping around in the basement, going through all of my dad's stuff. I'd found lots of innocuous things in the basement before, like the entire first print set of the Hardy Boys. Hardback, I know. I'd really love to find those. Fireworks, smoke bombs, ammunition, pocket knives, a dive knife, which was really cool. In all of my snooping, I had found stuff that boys growing into men should have. But then I found that box. It was full of magazines. Keep in mind, this was before the internet. I should have been safe, but I wasn't. But the damage was done. I learned that day there was a place where I could learn all that I wanted about the things that I was most fascinated by. I still to this day remember exactly what I saw. I don't like talking about it a whole lot because I simply have not been able to block out that particular set of memories. It is entrenched into my brain. That is the kind of power that those kinds of images have in my life. I don't remember how I was caught, but the box disappeared. Here's what I do remember. I recall how my dad treated me. He shamed me for looking at all of that stuff. They were his. I think he was mad that he had to get rid of them. But nonetheless, I was hooked. I searched and searched for them. I couldn't believe that he would just throw it away. I tore apart all the places that I could think of that he would hide it. As I said before, though, the damage was done. I never forgot what I saw. I began to see everything through the lens of sexuality. And then came the internet. I like to back up a little bit and talk about my church life. Church was always a part of life growing up. I was a Baptist. I was saved around the age of 8 and baptized around that time. Every single time the doors were open, I was there. I went because they made me, but the truth is there were pretty girls there, so they got almost all of my attention while we were there. Eventually, I couldn't separate the two in my mind. Girls equaled church. I eventually found a girl at one of the churches I attended. She was the daughter of a deacon, and we got ourselves in quite a bit of trouble. We just used each other for the same reason. I've not really spoken to her since the time when we broke up upon learning of my enlistment. But just to back up, I believed in Jesus. I believed in the wonderful Sunday school versions of all the stories that I learned about. I did. I believed it. There was a time when I questioned my salvation later on, but because of this foundation, Yahweh brought me back to the fold when I left during my Navy years. Before that happened, though, I was prone to ever-increasing depression, self-worth issues, desire for self-harm, suicidal thoughts and desires. At the time, I believed that he would certainly condemn me to hell. That was the only thing that kept me from doing it. I hated people. I was dark and lost like the prodigal son. I hated living at home with my parents. I resented their rules and attempts at discipline and guidance. I resented every time I was hauled in front of some pastor so they could stick their self-righteous finger in my face and tell me, true story, of how they conquered it, how they conquered their addictions and their troubles. They could do it. They were pastors. I couldn't. So I didn't try. I didn't want to, really. I eventually started to drink. Not heavily yet, but I wouldn't say no if I could get my hands on it. In 2003, I joined the Navy. I shipped off and never looked back. My dad was not at my graduation. I figured that would be the case. I used the next 3 years of my life to do whatever I could get away with. I walked like a sailor. I talked like a sailor. I drank like a sailor. I fought like a sailor. I bought time with girls in multiple ports and acted out in my own self-gratification in any and every way that I could. It was a life of parties and recklessness, coupled with the hangovers at muster that accompanied all of that. Later, I would begin my descent into the weed culture that was everywhere in Southern California. It almost got me kicked out of the Navy due to the Bush-era zero tolerance policies. While I was in the Navy, though, I saw firsthand the cruelty of sex trafficking. Y'all, it's real. It's one of the reasons I watch so closely over my children. Not all monsters are furry with horns and claws. Not all demons have pitchforks. Not all slave traders seem evil when we meet them. There came a point that I recognized my emptiness and yearning for something more in life, something more in line with what God had in store for me. I had two turning point experiences separate from each other. I remember them well. First, I saw the beauty in God's handiwork. I used to sneak outside the skin of the ship to smoke cigarettes. It means go outside. You weren't supposed to do that at night, but I did. And I remember looking up in the sky and looking down at the luminescent glow of the algae in the ocean. I knew right then and there that there was indeed a creator. I had a warm feeling wash over me as I immediately knew who that creator was. Nature is still this kind of reminder for me. Second, I realized that next to Jesus, I was alone. So I did what I always done. I looked for a woman. This time it was for the purpose of marriage. I knew that was what I was supposed to do. Marriage is definitely what God wanted for me. I went to the only place that was comfortable, the internet. This at first didn't work well. But at first, if you don't succeed, try again. I found a pretty lady. She's smart. I could tell by how pretty she was. I would learn most of life's toughest lessons with her at my side. She's my partner in crime. She is my Bonnie. That's for you. Sorry, Colleen, I didn't write that. Without her pushing me, I would have never come as far as I did. Not everything was amazing. Carolyn and I had brought both of us brought our baggage into our relationships, from our past to the present. Neither one of us lived for Jesus. In fact, in the beginning, she wasn't even a believer. I knew that I was not equally yoked, which is Christianese for a couple people who do not share the same beliefs. We use it when we're most referring to a relationship or a marriage where there's one believer and one is not. But that's not the only application. And it really wasn't the issue at the time, because I had no interest in living for Jesus. I completely walked away from the practice of my faith. I hadn't really stopped believing in God. There's two experiences that I had, but that was it. My belief in God was well solidified in my heart, but I did not make the attempt to serve him. Remember, this time I was still a sailor, seeking my own self-gratification at the expense of myself and others. I had no business being in a relationship with anyone. We were sexually active very early on in our relationship, and soon we were living together. We drank together, we smoked together, we lived party to party. I would go to sea for short periods of time and go right back to the dysfunction. This really set the stage for the next act in this God story. I left the Navy in 2007. I was lost and didn't want to be found. I started working as a meat clerk at a grocery store that didn't drug test. I went job to job for years. Video game tester, kid soccer instructor. Seriously, it's a real thing. Hospital security guard, professional college student. That was one of the benefits I got from my miraculous honorable discharge. Ask me sometime, and I'll tell you the story how I got away with that. The gist of it, though, is that God is ultimately responsible for the discipline of his children, and he had something else in mind. But for the time being, I had not run out of rope yet. The sudden stop was coming. This is about the time when God was preparing to make his grand entrance back into my life in a major way. I remember one night when Carolyn and I were having one of those times when we were stuck in our codependency cycle of crazy. She broke down. I was breaking. I didn't know where else to turn except to the gospel. I talked about it before, but it wasn't a regular focus of our relationship, as I'd said. You know, self-gratification and such. That night, I asked Carolyn if she believed in hell. Yeah, not normally the way that I would present the gospel. And she responded that she didn't believe that there was a hell worse than the one that we were living. And I told her she was mistaken. I explained to the best of my knowledge what hell is. Ultimately, a permanent and eternal separation from God. The Holy Spirit moved that night as she came to believe in Jesus as her Savior. It would be a long time until we made him Lord. So let me explain. After our conversion, Carolyn asked me what the next step was, and I said that we needed to go to church. So we found one in Ocean Beach. We found a church in Ocean Beach. It was the Ocean Beach First Baptist Church in San Diego, California. The next step was baptism for Carolyn. That happened in June of 2008. I baptized her in the Pacific Ocean as the tide was coming in. It was a sweet moment, even though we were fighting the surf. After that, I said we needed to get involved. I would play bass, she would serve with children. Ultimately, she and I would both be serving with the youth, but before we could do all of that, the pastor informed us that we cannot serve in those roles while we still live together. So the option was to separate our living situation or get married. The former was not an option because we were barely surviving. A huge pot and booze habit will do that. And the latter was something we had talked about, but had decided to put off for reasons that seem foolish to me now. But hey, there was a lot about me that was foolish. On October 18th, 2008, we were married on the Sunset Cliffs in Ocean Beach, San Diego, California. This is such a special day in my memory. The place itself is tragically gone due to erosion and a cliff collapse, but nonetheless, it was one of the most amazing days of my life. Very soon after, my porn addiction took center stage. I had preached purity, but I wasn't pure. I painted a picture of godly marriage as the example of our relationship with Jesus, but I defiled it. I was a hypocrite. This began a cycle of repeated hitting the bottom, but not quite getting the motivation to recover. Think of it like an airplane crash that skips along the ground trying to land until under the pilot's own skill, but it slams to a stop in a fiery, mangled wreck. I would get sober, but relapse every time I found an opportunity. I'm good with computers and thus found many ways to indulge. Every time I would eventually make a mistake and get caught, we would fight. I would eventually learn to manipulate Carolyn by becoming destructively angry. I broke tables, chairs, doors, walls. Never did I hit her. I wasn't going to cross that line like I was some kind of saint. We still lived like hell, and the world outside of the church walls, drinking, smoking, pass out and repeat. Then on Sundays and Wednesday nights, we'd go to church. That was our pattern. I later learned through the process of my personal inventory that I used drinking and pot smoking and anger as a way to cope and mask my guilt. I would use them to hide the symptoms. That way she couldn't tell. If I could, I would just deflect attention, and I would survive to do it again another day. One day, we were found out. We were taken out of service, and very soon we left the church. I'm still sad over this, but now I respect their decision and understand that they had to protect the ministry from my example of worldly living. I didn't get the message, though, for a long time. Something had to change. I sought out recovery in different ways, meetings with pastors, group meetings at church ministries, but I never got sober. Not for long. The cycle of crazy repeated itself. Sobriety, relapse, fight, make promises, do it all over again. Step 1 says, we admitted we were powerless over our addictions and compulsive behaviors, that our lives had become unmanageable. My life is unmanageable without Jesus. Romans 7:18 says, I know that nothing good lives in me, that is in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. This is where I had to start. This is the first rung up the ladder of recovery. Carolyn was done with me by 2014. We had our first son in 2012, and we were just about to have our daughter when I was caught again. Carolyn was ready to go, but God. I was given an ultimatum, and on the third day, I chose to finally make the effort. I had gone to CR the year prior, but I never went back after Newcomers 101. Y'all, I got a ton of excuses. If you looked it up on Amazon, I would have the top 3 bestsellers on the topic of excuses. It's true. Eventually, in July of 2014, I went to CR in Conyers. It became clear that I needed more than a mixed issues group, so after Sherry was born, I made the move to CR Eastridge so I could join the recovery from sexual addiction small group. This is my main thing. All my other bad behaviors could be traced back to this issue. All of the self-gratification was rooted in my quest for sexual gratification. I finally had the support that I needed, but my mindset had to change. This is one of my favorite passages in all of the Bible. Romans 12:1 and 2. And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind you will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way that you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is perfect and pleasing. This is something that I have to remember every day. I started with just going to big group, which is now the small group, which is right after this. But that wasn't enough. I soon realized I had to work the whole program. So I joined a step study and then quit. Then I joined another one, finished that one, and was finally on my way. I began to serve. I served because you can't keep what you don't give away. I played in the band. I love all of them so dearly. Slowly and surely, the cycle of crazy slowed. God is working in my life. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. It took decades becoming the selfish man that I was. It's taking decades to become the man of God the man that God wants me to be. Some people experience miracles quickly, like a flash of lightning. Not so much for me. My miracle is ongoing. This seems like slow motion sometimes, but it's there. I'm grateful for all of the people who have poured into me. I'm especially grateful for Eric, who is my sponsor and friend. Also for all the people that I serve with. Porn and sexual sin is not a major part of my life anymore. Over the years, relapse has reared its ugly head, but every time I get back up, I keep coming back. I stay plugged in. If I don't, I'll fall. I read my Bible. I cut out worldly influence. I have different friends. That's been quite hurtful over the years, but I needed to change my playgrounds and playmates. I even refused to drive past the adult stores for a long time. I do my part, and God does his. That's how it works. Newcomers, thank you so much for being here. It is so difficult to walk up that hill for the first time. I know. I've been there. You may not know it, but you've been prayed for. We were looking for you. We are waiting for you. We are so happy that you came. Now, hear me out. Tonight is the first night of the rest of your life. You have a choice right now as I wrap up. You get to exercise your free will, possibly for the first time in your life. You can either walk out that door in the back, or you can walk over to that door over there for Newcomers 101. I did. There's only hope there. It's for everyone. No matter what you've done, it's for you. Even if you don't believe in Jesus, it's for you. Don't get me wrong. You can get sober without Jesus, but there is no true life change without him. Jesus is who has changed me. He continues to change me. My life would be a fiery, mangled disaster without him. Maybe your life is a disaster. Maybe that's why you're here. But there's hope. It's Jesus. No one else. Not me. Not the leaders you see. Recovery is something that comes from above, not from within. As I close tonight, I need to stress that I can't do this alone. I need my CR family. The people in this room are family to me. I need that. God provided that. I need to hear the truth and keep an honest view of myself. CR helps with this. The people in this room help me with that. I have accountability through men in this room. Never had that before till I came here. It's kind of scary. But I have a home here. I have solid teaching and biblical application in regards to my recovery. I have love. I have support. I know where to turn when my life seems to have turned on me. CR has taught me to never stop coming. I never stop getting up after I fall. I never stop coming back. God took my filthy life and made it clean, and he keeps on doing it. That is where the hope is. I'm not any different from anyone else. I need God, and so do you. When we gave into this love and grace, we can actually be forgiven. I know that you think that I don't know what you have done in your life, and if I did, I wouldn't include you. God knows, and he does include you. I'm the living proof. Taking a chance to tell you about me so that you would believe it too. Thanks for letting me share.